we talked about electromagnetic interactions, and we said that these conserve, actually they conserve helicity, and the interaction is also parity even. Okay, and the way to do this or see this is to write the interaction vertex, which is psi bar gamma mu psi. So I have dropped the minus IE, I do not care about that, that is just a constant. Okay, this is a proper vector. Okay, and I showed you that this interaction vertex can be written as psi bar L gamma mu. Somebody needs to mute again. What was it? This would have been 1 plus and this would have been 1 minus. Yeah. So this would have been psi bar L gamma mu psi L plus psi bar R gamma mu psi R. There may be some factors which I have not, I do not know whether there is a half or not, or maybe quarter or whatever, but basically we showed that the LL and the RR parts remain, and we also, this is what you did in your notebooks, right, yourselves, so you understand this very well, whereas the LR and the RL parts disappeared. That means when I couple this J dot A interaction, which is J mu A mu, so when I couple this apart from the IE, when I couple this to the electromagnetic field, the electromagnetic field couples equally, maybe I should put back the IE. So with the same constant E, it couples with equal strength to the left-handed part of the current and the right-handed part of the current. So that was what we have seen so far, which is electromagnetic interactions. Now we are saying in weak interactions, we have not formally written down what is the vertex, okay, but we have shown that this coupling to the, I will now write W. So Z is complicated, by the way, okay. Z is complicated, we will not talk about it until maybe 5 classes down, but for weak interactions like beta decay, we are only looking at charge current processes, and apart from some coefficient, and instead of E, you remember I wrote root of Jf by root 2, because two couplings together, two terms like this together gave you a Gf by root 2, that was Fermi's statement. But basically you can see that this W mediator, which is the weak analog of the electromagnetic mediator, couples only to the left-handed field. So let me write it down explicitly. So what we have said now is that we are writing, so let me write, so I do not have an overall constant, let me just write a G weak for now. That G weak itself will cause us a lot of difficulty. All I want to tell you is that is this clear? Okay, there will be some more indices on the W, we will come to that, but basically I want you to appreciate that there is no right-handed coupling, and therefore parity is, yeah, oh sorry, ask, yeah, ask the question.
So this concept of only the left-handed coupling for weak interactions,
yes,
do it come from that GU experiment, or
yes,
comes
absolutely,
theoretically?
absolutely, it comes from, see, we are writing, what we are doing is called particle physics phenomenology, okay. So the first part of the course that we did was spectroscopy, now we are looking at phenomena. So what we are going to do is, from the phenomena we try to extract the relevant physically relevant information and then build our theory. So what I have done is that I presented electromagnetic interactions, okay, then I am going to present now weak interactions. As I said, I will not have time to do strong interactions, but once you look at weak interactions, it is simply a generalization of that. There should be no difficulty. Only then will I write the Lagrangian for particle physics, okay, what is called the standard model of particle physics. That is because in this initial course, introductory course in particle physics, it is more important to understand the phenomena than to have a model, because I assume that all of you are theorists, good theorists. Given a Lagrangian and given Euler-Lagrange equation of motion, you can calculate everything. That is mechanical. But how the model got built up, how the standard model got built up, looking at what phenomena in nature that we see which describes these interactions, right? That is what is important for us. So, Li and Yang postulated that maybe parity is not conserved in weak interactions. Wu showed that parity is violated. This was extracted to indicate that parity is maximally violated. She also made a statement about charge conjugation being violated, which is also correct. So, both charge conjugation and parity are violated in weak interactions, and we represent that in our mathematical model by saying that the W couples only to the left-handed particle fields, and in fact it will couple to the right-handed antiparticle field. So, that is why I said these are all not exact. I just want you to highlight or observe that this coupling is 0. Is that okay? So, we have a left-handed current. So, we do not have equal coupling to left and right fields. Does not mean that the right-handed field is not there. The right-handed electron field is there, and it will couple, for example, to electromagnetic fields, right? It is only with the neutrino, because neutrino does not couple to either electromagnetic or strong interactions, that you ask the question, if neutrino is massless, why on earth should there be a right-handed neutrino? But we will come to that later. I am only talking about general nature of weak interactions. Okay. Next, when we wrote electromagnetic interactions, we wrote the propagator for a massless photon. So, we wrote propagator for the mediator. Yeah, ask.
We find that the vertex term for this in hybrid model is gamma mu minus gamma phi.
Yes, gamma mu into 1 minus gamma phi. Yeah.
Gamma mu into 1 minus gamma phi.
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it gives us gamma L bar, gamma mu, gamma L, right?
Sorry, so sorry, maybe I should have done this again. 1 second, let me write it again.
Yeah.
Is equivalent to psi bar L, gamma mu, psi L, okay? Apart from some constants, I do not remember what the constants are, okay?
Yeah, so this form of gamma mu to 1 minus gamma phi is also motivated from the same factor.
Yeah.
Wu experiment.
Yes, that is why I am writing it like this. Only left-handed coupling comes only from this nature. So, as I said, Wu experiment, from there is a history, right? I mean, as I said, there were a lot of people, including Feynman, Sudarshan and Marshak, many people who came up with what I called the V minus A theory. So, what happened? Let us write a history of weak interactions. So, first came Fermi theory. Fermi theory just wrote psi bar gamma mu psi, okay? And as I said, it works for that object, and I told you to look at Halzen and Martin. He looked at oxygen decay. Oxygen decays to, I think it was nitrogen, but it is a beta plus decay process, okay? So, this is worked out in Halzen and Martin, okay? And now what happens is that there is no spin flip between the two. It is a 0 plus to 0 plus transition, and because there is no spin flip, this part of your coupling does not is not effective at all, because there is no spin flip, and therefore only this part of the coupling actually works, and therefore Fermi theory works in those places where there is no spin flip involved. So, for certain beta decays it will work, for certain other which are called Gamow-Teller transitions, those of you who have done nuclear physics may have heard of the Gamow-Teller transition, it will not work for such theories where spin flips are actually possible. From Fermi theory came the V minus A theory, as I said, by so many people, okay, and there they said that because parity is observed to be violated in weak interactions, this form where parity is maximally violated, V minus A, not V minus 0.9A or V minus 1.1A, but exactly 1V minus 1A, okay, and therefore a very nice elegant, see, this is the elegance that theorists are looking for, okay. Theorists hate it when there are, fractions involved. Well, maybe half is allowed, but not anything else, okay. So, this kind of 1 minus gamma phi, which gives you vector minus axial vector, or a V minus A theory came up next. But still they had no idea, because people were thinking that there might be a propagator, might not be a propagator. They did not realize that the propagator is going to be, because after a massless photon, the next propagator that was involved has 100 GeV kind of mass, right, 100 times the mass of a proton. And the experiments were simply not geared to observe such large mass particles, okay. And therefore, for a long time the approximate theory, so as I said, the propagator for, and I will actually not actually write the proper W or Z boson. As I said, I will not write what the numerator is because there is a complication there, but I am only interested in either MW or the denominator. Okay. This denominator is dictated by the mass shell condition because photon mass is 0. This is q squared minus m squared always in the denominator. Okay. The structure of the numerator may be different. The propagator for quark or electron or any fermion is I, some again numerator we do not care, by p squared minus m squared. Again the mass shell condition, that is what keeps the propagator off shell. The denominator is always p squared minus m squared. Okay. So the thing is that at those low energies that these theories were being applied to, the processes that these theories were being applied to, the q squared was so small compared to the mw squared that the denominator was simply minus mw squared. So when you square the matrix element, you just get mw power 4, which is like a constant, and then there is a numerator has some coupling over here which I have not written. There is some coupling constant for this. I removed the vertex which was that GW which I wrote. So the whole thing is some constant, and that is what was called G Fermi. Okay, and as I said, historically he put a 1 by root 2 over there, and so it is called G Fermi by root 2. Okay. So since this numerator of the propagator is extremely complicated, it will require much advanced understanding of these field theories, and we do not really need it at this point because we are very happy to just put a constant over there and completely remove the propagator term. Okay. So we are going to only do the following. We are going to write a left-handed coupling for the vertex, and we are going to write a constant which has dimensions of 1 by mw squared, actually 1 by mw, yeah, 1 by mw squared. Okay. Is this clear? Is the methodology clear? We will do the sample weak interaction calculation. We will try to understand some physics from there, and then as I said, we will do 2 pieces of calculation for weak interactions, and after that we will go back to writing a formal Lagrangian, and then you will see where all the complexities come and why I could not say, I mean I can still write all this down, but there is no motivation, there is no physical motivation, and you will be very hard pressed to understand why we are actually doing certain things and writing such complicated terms. So we are just building it up step by step. So everything I am trying to do in the beginning is coming from observation. So this is the background. Now shall I start the calculation? Is it clear? Is it clear what I have done now in my model? I am going to write a vertex which does not have this piece, but where I remember the vertex is mu. Okay. And then I am going to have another vertex over here. So this is my muon decay. So this is my muon coming in with momentum p. This is my nu mu going out with momentum k, and then this is my electron coming out with momentum p prime. So you can see the charged leptons have momentum p's or p primes, and the nu e bar, they have k and k prime. So this was the notation of Halzen, so that you can go back and compare your calculation with Halzen's calculation, except that this whole vertex, I am going to replace these 2 vertices. I am going to remember this. As I said, I do not want to call 2 things as muon. So what did I call it? Rho and lambda, I think, right? Rho and lambda are the vertices. So I will remember the rho and lambda indices, but I will simply assume there is a g rho lambda term and no more propagator, simply that overall constant capital G Fermi, okay, or G Fermi by root 2. So with this I will now write the calculation again. So what do we have? I am asking what is the decay rate for this process. Mu goes to nu mu e bar. So P goes to K, P prime, K prime. Okay. So what is d gamma? The initial flux is just the E of the muon. Then there is a matrix element squared, Q1 minus Im squared bar, because I have to do a spin averaging. The initial state is a fermion, and then I have to write 2 pi power 4 delta 4 of P minus P prime minus K prime, and then I will write the d cubed P prime. I am introducing some notation now. So, this tilde refers to okay, just to save on writing. Is it clear? And yesterday what I started with was looking at this matrix element. So now let me write down this matrix element.
Shouldn't K dash be plus?
Why all three are in the final state? P
Yeah, but
is
K, yeah, but K dash is like it is an antiparticle, so it will be minus.
no. See, sorry, please understand. This is very important. The momentum is always going out for final states. How do I indicate that? Okay, this arrow is not the momentum direction. It just indicates it's an antiparticle and therefore I should put a V rather than a U bar. That's all. Okay, the momentum is always going out. So let me write here. You can see, I hope, this part of the board. So I am here writing the momentum directions. So this is P, this is K, P prime, K prime. Okay, that arrow is to indicate antiparticle, but the momentum is going outwards, right? It is being produced. You remember that we have taken U3 and U4 and converted it to V2 and V1 by taking E going to minus C so that we have all positive energy eigenstates, that's all. So this is simply a notation to show there is an antiparticle. In fact, I don't, if I label it, usually I label it only K prime. Since I put it as nu E bar, I didn't even have to show this arrow. Please don't make a mistake about it. That arrow has nothing to do with momentum flow direction, okay? So,
Like when we did crossing symmetry, we changed like PA to minus PC because the antiparticle came to the other side.
Yeah, but you can see that the outgoing momentum becomes the incoming momentum. That is a different thing, right? That is a different thing. It didn't mean that
Nothing to do with the antiparticle.
no, it has nothing to do with the antiparticle, right? See, something coming in and something going out, right? Look, let's look at this for example. Here, P is equal to K plus P prime plus K prime. These are the momenta, so they're all some 4 vectors, right? If you want, I can put an index over here, alpha, 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 I mean, but you know what I mean, right? I don't want to mess up with too many indices. Now what am I saying? I want this antiparticle nu E bar to go to the front so that I have the process nu E mu goes to nu mu E, right? That is the process. So what will happen? The K has to go to the front, right? K has to go to the other side. So what does this mean? When K comes to this side, it is P minus K prime is equal to K plus P prime. Therefore, you can write this as P plus. That's all. So that's why when it went to the front, it got minus sign. Did you understand?
Okay.
Yeah, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes, ask the question.
Can you explain the prefactor of that prefactor 1 by 2 E mu? I am not able to get that. So
Initial flux, right? Okay, sorry, this is long, old story. So what is the initial flux? We did initial flux for 2 cases. We had A, B, this is for cross section, and then we just had A, right? A decay. This is for decay. So what is it for A? This A going to be, we had, for example, if we had, let us take B at rest, okay. So we had B at rest. Then we said that the velocity of V was VA. That means in 1 second, these many particles would actually interact. So let us put, sorry, my 2D, 3D drawings are all very bad, but this is where this object has just started to interact with the target. So in 1 second, because the velocity is VA, is the distance travelled in unit time. So VA length of this beam will interact with the target particles B, and this VA number of particles, and we took unit cross section. So the volume here is VA into 1, so the volume VA, but we have actually taken 2 EA as the number of particles per unit volume, right? So in a volume VA, there are 2 EA VA particles, and for B there are just 2 EB particles, and that's how we converted that into a Lorentz invariant flux. So this is the flux for cross section.
Yeah, I got it.
Now here we just have one decaying particle, so there are 2 EA particles in that unit volume. You remember I said always the volume element cancels, so I can always take it to be per unit volume, right? Good. So okay, that was revision of something which happened long ago. So as I said, anyway I am only going to write minus Im. Let me write minus Im. So what is minus Im? So I have UK bar gamma rho 1 minus gamma phi UP, and the other vertex will be U bar P prime and gamma rho again, because I have now one minus gamma phi. Now Vk prime. So by the now you understand that this arrow just tells you it's an antiparticle, okay, and the whole thing is multiplied by Gf by root 2. So there is no propagator over here. Now this part is clear, okay? Is this clear? So this is the Feynman rule given to you. This vertex is this vertex is this, overall constant is Gf by root 2. So effectively Gf is like, if I had electromagnetic interaction, I would have had an E here and an E here. So Gf is essentially like a E squared. So if I have a G weak over here and a G weak over here, Gf is like a G weak squared, and of course it will be divided by mw squared, because we know that we have swallowed up the propagator in defining this, okay. Fine. Now do you want me to do this trace again?
Ma'am,
Huh.
so when we are not considering any type of
Sorry, one at a time. Vaibhav first.
So we are not considering any type of propagator. Then why we are considering there are two vertices in this problem?
See, this is the model of Fermi. Why is not the answer. We know now why, right? Now I am saying that, see, we know now that there is a propagator, which is the W propagator. Maybe I will put it out here, okay. And this W propagator will have a 1 by, so if you want I can write it over here, 1 by, or here I will insert it, 1 by q squared minus mw squared, and I can drop the q squared because it is of the order of MeV, whereas mw squared is of the order of 100 GeV. So I will be left with only a term which has over here some Gf prime or whatever by root 2 and an mw squared, right, which is another constant. So I simply absorb it in Gf and call that Gf prime as Gf, that is all. Do you understand? So this is all hindsight. See, we now understand this theory at a much better level than what Feynman or Marshak and Sudarshan. Well, hopefully we understand it better than they did. So we are assuming that we will put a propagator there, but that propagator simply gives you mw squared. So that is some other constant. That's all. It's just some constant. Is it okay? Yeah. So somebody, Prem had some comment. Jatin, who was it? Sometimes I can't recognize the voices. Who said something else?
Yes, I was saying that we can do this trace.
Very good, excellent. So good. So let me just, so the answer, so what we have to do is m squared bar was half, because there is one spin half particle in the initial state, and then sum over all the spins of two traces, right? And then there was one had a no gamma phi term, the other had one gamma phi term, because we kept only the mass of the muon. And when you do that, we got, I don't remember, I think it was 32 and we made it 64, right? Gf squared p dot k prime into p prime dot k. Since it was just day before yesterday, I remember that. If that's not the answer, we will correct it later. So I will put it here, okay? So I'm putting m squared bar is 64 Gf squared p dot k prime into p prime dot k. So I am going to remove this part. Yeah.
Excuse me, I
Yeah.
have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So while calculating the m square,
Huh.
so which spins do we average over and which one do we sum over?
So why we do this is, when we have, let us take collision, this is decay but the same thing. So I have collision, every time I have a collision, A and B are in some particular spin state, but I may not have measured that. So for example, let us take the example of two fermions. So both could have been spin up, both could have been spin down, one could have been up down, the other could have been down up. So there are 4 possible states, or rather each one is in 2 possible states, right? So what you do is that when you do the cross section calculation in the experiment, since you have not observed the spin of the initial state, you simply average over this. So you write 1 by 2 sum over spin of the A type times 1 by 2 spin of the B type. Now AB goes to CD. Okay. Now what is it that we do in the phase space calculation? We are asking what are the possible final scattering states, right? And we counted that to be this kinematically with only respect to the momentum, but there is also a spin. Again, we are not observing the spin of the final state. So C could have been in any 2 of the spin states, D could have been in any 2 of the spin states, but since we are counting all of them, I am not going to average them because each one is going to give me a contribution to my cross section, right? So always I sum over the final spins and I average over the initial spins. So now in our case I will be doing half, sum over the spin of the mu1 and then sum over the spin of this, this and this. Is the logic clear? However, we also have polarized experiments, okay, where I actually scatter say up spin A with up spin B. Then of course you will neither do average nor sum. You will actually keep the spin information for A and keep the spin information for B, and your cross section, which I will not have time to talk about in this very introductory course, will therefore be dependent on SA and SB. And maybe I will just, for those who are keen, if I do not have a summation over S, okay, this is what I had, sorry, P of S was P slash plus M, and if I do not sum over S, I will get 1 plus gamma phi S slash. This is S slash, okay, I hope you can see it by 2. So it will keep the spin information, you will get gamma phi term, and that you know that you should get, because you remember that we always said that spin, angular momentum all are axial vector, and now we know that this gamma phi always, you know, gamma mu gamma phi term, because this is gamma mu S mu, and therefore we know that this is an axial vector part, right? So I don't refuse to go in that direction further. I hope you understand the logic. I am going to now do this cleaning out the matrix element part. Are there any other questions on the matrix element part? Okay, so then I will go to the phase space. So what I started out doing in the last class was try to understand that phase space of 2 going to 2 when there are 2 particles in the final state is extremely straightforward. When there are 3 particles in the final state, okay, there are many ways of doing it. For example, in the final state, I do not care about this. I can think of this final state as nu mu coming out and a W coming out, right? So this is actually the process. Mu goes in, nu mu and W goes out. Then this W decays into electron and antineutrino. This can be very convenient in some cases. So what you can do is that since the whole thing is Lorentz invariant, you can actually do the decay of W going to E plus nu E minus nu bar in a different frame, and the decay of mu going to nu mu W in a different frame, and then do a Lorentz boost and match them all up. Okay. So kinematics is something that is extremely important for people who are interested in particle physics, but now I am only going to do a very simple exercise and I am just going to do it brute force. So what am I going to do brute force? Here I have decided that my muon is at rest, and since that's the only mass in the problem, I am going to just call it m. So I have E goes to m. When it is at rest, E is simply nothing but m, which is the mass of the muon. Every other mass I have set to 0. Okay. Next, since I have therefore P, which is the muon, so let me call it muon, P is equal to m 0 0 0. Now, as I said, I only want to observe this distribution. What is this particle? This is the beta particle in the beta decay, right? So this is all that you see. I am never going to see the neutrinos. So what I am going to do is that any one of the neutrinos, I am going to integrate out using this delta function, and the other neutrino is something that I will use. So let us call that, for example, nu E, okay, which has k prime. I will use it to define the z axis. So since it is massless for now, I will take the energy out to be omega prime, and therefore this is just defines the z axis. So the momentum is equal to the energy, and it is simply along the z direction. Now I want the electron, which also is massless, so I can just call it E prime, and it is at an angle theta with respect to this z axis. And our final particle, which was k, let us call it omega, and then it has all these objects. So let me just call it n prime. So it won't be theta, it will be sin theta prime cos phi prime, sin theta prime sin phi prime, and cos theta prime. So it will be most complicated object. So we will have to do all these integrations, right? So I take the most complicated object and complete the delta 4 integration so that it becomes trivial. Then I only have to struggle with, this has no angle dependence, so I will only have angle dependence in one of these particles. Do you understand how we have simplified the problem? So now that we have done this, let me rewrite only the phase space. So phase space is usually called dq. So that will contain, now what is it that I want to integrate out? The k. Yeah, ask the question. Yeah.
You have taken E outside, right?
Yeah, because everything is massless. Everything is massless except the muon.
Electron.
Yeah, electron, everything is massless.
Yeah.
But everything is massless except the muon.
No,
I have just assumed it because it's all small, right?
we cannot take E outside for electron, right? Because electron has some mass.
No, but I have taken it to be massless. I have taken everything to be massless except the m.
Okay. Yeah.
Here, because maybe, well, it's 106 MeV, but it's basically 100 MeV. So it's 200 times heavier, right? So I don't need to care about it. Okay, so I have taken this also to be around 0. Then this will just become whatever, I do not want to keep rubbing it out, okay. So this is just E prime comes out 1 sin theta cos theta, okay, 1 sin theta 0 cos theta. So now I want to integrate out the k, so then I will convert the d cubed k into d4k. So how will I do that? I will write it as d4k by 2 pi power 4, maybe I will write it last, d4k by 2 pi power 4, 2 pi delta plus of k squared minus m squared, but that m squared is 0, right. Then I have 2 pi, can you still see this board? P minus p prime minus k prime. And of course I am going to just put d cubed p prime and d cubed k prime sitting over here. So what will that give me? D cubed p prime, d cubed k prime. So maybe I should just at this point write down what they are. 2 pi cubed 2 e prime by 2 pi cubed 2 omega prime, right. And now d4k delta 4k is just 1. So everything goes away. I am left with only 2 pi delta plus of, what is k now? K is p minus p prime minus k prime, p minus p prime minus k prime squared. minus, just to tell you that the mass squared of that neutrino is 0. Okay? So I,
Can you
yes,
explain d? Hello.
yes.
From du. Can you explain one more time? From du.
Sorry, huh? du.
From du. D capital U.
Where is d capital U? dq,
Yes.
dq.
dq. Yeah.
This one. Here, this is the phase
Yes.
space. I am writing this part as the phase space.
Okay.
So I have written the 2 pi power 4 delta power 4 here, d cube p prime over here, d cube k prime over here, and the d cube k I have converted it into, so I have written d cube k by 2 pi cube, this we have done many times, right, 2 e k is equal to d power 4 k by 2 pi power 4, 2 pi delta of k squared. This is generic, I am writing the generic formula. This I did for you long ago, right?
Yes.
And this delta times theta is usually called delta plus, so that I don't have to write the theta, okay. So that's all I've done. Is this clear? So I've put that in and I've written that here. So 2 pi power 4, 2 pi power 4 cancels. d4k delta 4k is 1 with k is equal to p minus p prime minus k prime. So in this part of the equation, I've substituted p minus p prime minus k prime squared. And now there's a 2 pi power 3, 3 plus 3 is 6 and a 2 pi. So that will give me d cube p prime, d cube k prime by 2 pi power 5, 2 e prime, 2 omega prime. And now let's look at the delta function. So p squared is m squared. So I'm writing a minus b minus c squared is a squared plus b squared is 0, k prime squared is 0 minus 2p dot p prime minus 2p dot k prime plus 2p prime dot k prime. Now I'm going to not keep writing this because that's boring, I'm just going to look at this, right. Now let's do this substituting over here. So m squared. Now what is p dot p prime? You can see that p dot p prime is simply m into e prime. Now what is p dot k? So p dot k prime. P dot k prime is m into omega prime. Now look at p prime dot k prime. Sorry, have I done something wrong? No, it's correct, yeah. P prime dot k, oh this is k prime, yeah. So p prime dot k prime has two terms. One into, okay, let's not confuse ourselves. It has 1 into 1 minus 1 into cos theta, right. So this will be plus 2 e prime omega prime 1 minus cos theta. Is it okay? And that is equal to, so that is equal to, this coefficient still sits there. So delta plus of a minus b cos theta, right. So where a is up till this and b is it okay? So that is equal to, now I can do the cos theta integration. So I have to find where in this portion I have a cos theta integration. So now let me look at p prime. So p prime will have the cos theta integration, but let me just write down both d cube p prime and d cube k prime. So what is this close square bracket? This d cube p prime is, what is d cube p prime? P prime squared d cos theta d phi for p prime, right. So it will be p prime squared d cos theta, that is called cos theta itself, and there is no phi dependence, so I just make it 2 pi. It will integrate out to 2 pi, there is no phi dependence in the problem. What about d cube k prime? It will be k prime squared. Now k prime has neither theta nor phi, so the d omega integration simply will give you 4 pi. Is this clear? Is it clear? Divided by 2 pi power phi 4 e prime omega prime. So that will give me and what is p prime? Is simply e prime, so let me write that down. And similarly k prime was what we called omega prime, right? So e prime and e prime, 1 e prime cancels. Similarly omega prime square and omega prime, 1 omega prime cancels. Okay. So 2 pi, and let me write this as 2 into 2 pi. So there is a 2 pi into 2 pi which will cancel to give you a 1 by 2 pi cubed. There is a 2 left over and there is a 4 here, so there will be a 2 left over in the denominator. So I have cancelled this and written the remaining part here. I have cancelled e prime omega prime, so the whole denominator I have finished cancelling. I only have to now write the numerator d e prime. I will write d cos theta later, d omega prime d cos theta. So the whole thing is finished, this whole square bracket is finished, and now this delta A minus B cos theta is 1 by B delta of A by B minus cos theta. I hope you remember delta where I have used delta of Ax is equal to 1 by A delta of x. I hope you can see this part of the board. Is it clear? Is everything clear up till here? And what was B? 2 e prime omega prime. So let me just write it as 2 e prime omega prime, and you can see that this simply cancels with this, but leaving the factor 2 over here. Okay. So now I am going to remove this as well. Okay. So all this tells us is that wherever in my matrix element I have cos theta, I have to replace it by A by B. Is it clear? So my cos theta integration is finished, and therefore I only have, sorry, yeah, so this is equal to therefore d e prime d omega prime. So 2 into 2 is 4 into 2 pi cubed, and then I have, that is all, with cos theta is equal to A by B. So now let me write down over here for later reference, A is equal to m squared minus 2m e prime minus 2m omega prime plus 2 e prime omega prime. B is equal to 2 e prime omega prime. Okay, fine. So that I can have some more space. You see how we have reduced things over here? Now, therefore, d gamma is equal to 1 by 2m coming from this factor. This m squared was 64 gf squared p dot k prime into p prime dot k, and I have to integrate this factor over d prime d omega prime with the cos theta given as it is, and I have a 32, yeah, 2 2s are 4, 4 2s are 8, 8 4s are 32, I hope I got that right. So 32 into 2 is 64, so that is simply gf squared by m pi cubed into this integration. Okay, so far, with that cos theta being what it is. So now let me write that here. Okay. Now, what are the limits of this integration? right? I have to integrate it, right? So I have to find out what are the limits of this integration, and that will be given from this constraint. We have cos theta is equal to a by b, or rather we had, and we know that cos theta physically has to be less than plus or minus 1. Okay. So either a is equal to b or a is equal to minus b, and that will give us our limits. So let us just put that here. So first let me write a as m squared minus 2m e prime minus 2m omega prime plus 2 e prime. Maybe somebody should just work it out in their own notebooks and see if they get the answer. So I am using first the plus 1 case. I have taken a is equal to plus b. You can see that these two will cancel. So then I will get 2m e prime is equal to m squared minus 2m omega, that is equal to m and m will cancel. So I have m minus 2 omega prime by 2. Okay. Now omega prime is the energy of the neutrino. What is the smallest value of omega prime? What is the smallest value of omega prime? What can the energy be? Sorry? Yeah, but there is yeah, correct, rest mass, but we have taken it to be 0, so the smallest value of omega prime is 0.
Should be 0.
0. So that means when omega prime is 0, E prime will then be m by 2. That means E prime varies from, oh, I'll do it the other way around, m by 2, okay. Is it clear? Now we will put the other limit. Oh, sorry, what was that? E prime is equal to m minus 2 omega prime by 2, is it? Let me just keep that. Now I have the other case. I have the case 2 where cos theta was minus 1, so A is equal to minus B. Now what happens? I will collect all the E prime terms, so E prime, E prime, E prime are here. So I get 2 E prime plus 2 E prime is 4 E prime omega minus 2m is equal to, I will move everything to the other side, 2m omega prime minus m square, okay, which is m into 2 omega prime minus m, and here I can take out a 2, okay. So these two will cancel. So again I get E prime is equal to m by 2. Okay. So this I will then invert to find 2 E prime minus m, sorry, the other way around, m minus 2 omega prime is equal to E 2E. So m minus 2 E prime by 2 is equal to omega prime. So then I will integrate E from 0 to m by 2 and omega prime from m minus 2 E prime by 2 to m by 2. Sorry, can I write it again neatly? I will write it over here, the limits. The limits, so what was it? Here, m minus 2 E prime by 2 omega prime less than or equal to m by 2. Okay. Here I got E prime less than m by 2. So then if E prime is equal to m by 2, then this is just equal to 0. So omega prime depends on only E prime. So omega prime goes to m minus E prime by 2, and when E prime is 0, omega goes to m by 2, right? It is the inverse argument. When omega prime equal to 0, E prime is m by 2. When E prime is equal to 0, omega prime goes to m by 2. So both of them can go to maximum of m by 2, but then one of them, either E prime or omega, you must put the limit depending on the other. So either I say that E prime goes over this and omega is from 0 to m by 2, or omega goes depending on E prime and E prime goes from 0 to m by 2. It will be symmetric, it will give you the same answer, okay. Is it clear?
Ma'am, what is written with E dash in the limit actually? I can't.
Here I have written the limits over here, no?
Is that 2 m minus 2 E prime by 2?
Yeah, m minus 2, no? Here we got m minus 2e here.
So that is 2, right? In front of E dash.
Yeah. Sorry, my handwriting is bad. Okay, here. M minus 2e prime. That came from here, right? When these two cancel, when you had plus, when these two cancel, you can see that m squared minus 2m e prime is equal to 2m omega, right? So if I bring the 2m downstairs, it will be m and m will cancel, the half will be left over. So I'll get m minus 2e prime, and divided by this 2 will be less than or equal to omega, because this is a less than, right? These are the, I've just solved the limits. So is it okay? We have only one more thing to do before we can complete this integration, and that is to write these two quantities properly. Okay, so I am going to remove all this because I have got the limits over here. I am going to remove this thing and keep only the integration. So this is the, so I don't, if you can't see the limits of the integration, it's anyway over there, okay. What do I do with p dot k prime? P prime dot k. First of all, k has been integrated over, right. So I have to write k as p minus k minus p prime. So let me just write it down here. So p is equal to k, sorry, k prime. I am just writing it in the same order so that, okay. So what is p dot k prime? P dot k prime is m omega prime. You can see that, right? There is no other term. So this is equal to, the first term is m omega prime. What is the second term? So to find p prime dot k, of course I can substitute k as p minus k prime minus p prime, but a simpler thing to do is to just bring, because I want p prime dot k, right? I write this energy momentum conservation relation as this, right? And then I square both sides. And you can see that since p prime and k are both massless, this is simply the quantity that we require, 2p prime dot k. We will remove the 2 later. So this is equal to m squared minus 2p dot k prime. So p prime dot k is m squared minus, what was p dot k prime? M omega prime. Is it clear? So then we have, therefore, d gamma, so there is another half over here, gf squared by 2m pi cubed integral d e prime, those limits, integral d omega prime, those limits, and then one m is common here, so I will just take out that m over here. So m squared by m became m omega prime into m minus omega prime. Sorry, I made a mistake somewhere. Sorry, p dot k prime was m omega prime. So p prime dot k, because you see, I think it's correct. I was looking that there is no e prime dependence, but that comes from the limits of the integral. Okay, sorry. So when you integrate the omega, you will get e, and then you integrate the e. So this is not higher mathematics. Okay, integral of omega is omega squared by 2. Integral of omega squared is omega cubed by 3, and it's just very boring substitution. So I am not going to do it, unless somebody wants me to do it. Should I do it? Okay, I mean you can see that I'll have cubes and all that. You'll have to expand these quantities. So you'll get m, so into m squared by 4 minus m squared by 4 minus 1/3 of m by 2 minus m minus 2e prime cubed by 8. Okay, so I refuse to take this further. Please simplify this. It won't take time, but I will just give you the answer because there is nothing really much over here. Maybe I will give some in between steps. So this is here, up till here is okay, this answer, and then that gives you, maybe should I write all the steps? It does not matter, I will just write it down as, so this integral is of course full gamma, will come out to be g f squared m power 5 by 192 pi cube. Okay, fine. So you can see the pi cubed remains as pi cubed. Now, this was an m outside. This has mass dimension, this has mass dimension, this has mass dimension, this has mass dimension. So I have 4 mass dimensions, and the only mass dimension in this entire integral is m. So you know that you are going to get m power 4. So m power 4 into m is m power 5. So this is the result. You get gf squared into m power 5 by 192 pi cubed. Okay. Now all you need to do is, I can write gamma is equal to 1 by tau. Okay. Is this part clear? Is everybody understood this part? We have finished the calculation, so I am only going to interpret the results now. Okay. We know the mass of the muon, so m is, as I said, I am going to now write it in GeV, or you can write it as 106 MeV. Okay. I know 192 pi cubed, I do not know gf squared, right. How do I find gf squared? I have to find out the decay width, and the decay width I can get from the lifetime. We know that the tau lifetime, the mu lifetime at rest is 2.2 microsecond. And we know that gamma is equal to 1 by tau. Actually it is c by tau, and in fact I can write this as h cross. We know that h cross c is 200 MeV Fermi. So h cross is 200 MeV Fermi by 3 into 10 power 8 meter is, that is equal to 23. So let me just write, let me write 3 by 200 as 67 to 10 power minus 23 MeV meter. Sorry, second. That the whole point was to convert it into seconds, right? So if I have gamma in, if I have tau in seconds, then gamma is in MeV and vice versa, right? So I can write this as h cross by tau, and then I write this as 67 minus 23 MeV second by 2.2 to 10 power minus 6 seconds. So that is about 30. I am just doing round numbers now, into 10 power minus 23 minus 6 is 17 MeV. Right? which is around 10 power minus 16. Minus 16 eV. Something is wrong over here. What have I done wrong? Okay, fine. Probably correct. Okay, and therefore I have 3 into 10 power minus 16 MeV is equal to Gf squared 100, let me call it as 100 power 5 because I can't do this, and let me call 192 as 200 and pi cubed as 30. So let me keep 30, okay. So what is Gf squared? So here I have 1, 2, 3 zeros, so they will become 10 to the minus 13, right? And then here I have 10 zeros, oops. I have done something wrong here. Have I got it right? I have to multiply plus, yeah, so this will become minus 13. So Gf squared will come as 10 power minus 13 by 10, this is 5 2s are 10, right? 10 power minus 3, this is wrong, I should have got, okay, I have done something wrong here. What did I do in my notes? Probably I did it the other way around. Yeah, 3 into 10 power minus 16 MeV is right. So Gf squared is gamma 3 to 10 power minus 16 into 200 into 30 divided by 10 power 10, yeah. So how did I not get this right? This is completely correct. So I wrote it this way. So I wrote Gf squared as 3 into 10 power minus 16, let me write the original, that is here, 16 into 200 into 30 by 10 power 10, right? That's correct. Oh, by 10 power 10, sorry, so that will become minus, I did it, sorry, that is correct. So that is minus 16 minus 10 is minus 26, and then 1, 2, 3 zeros go away, so 10 power minus 23, and 3 2s are 6, 6 3s are 18, so 18 into 10 power minus 23, that is 2 into 10 power minus 21, 22, okay, or Gf is of the order of 10 power minus 11. Okay, is this okay? So it is really small quantity, and if I convert this is in per MeV squared, and I can write that as about 10 power minus 5 by mass of the nucleon. Where the mass of the nucleon is around 1. Mass of the nucleon is 0.938 GeV, right? So that is exactly around 1. So what I have here is that I have an estimate for this. So there are two things. One is that it has mass of the nucleon sitting inside it, and the other is that it is a very small quantity, right? You remember that alpha was around 10 power minus 3, right? 1 by 137. So here you have 10 power, sorry, minus 2. You have 10 power minus 5 is your constant number, and everything is written in terms of the nucleon mass. There are two things to understand here. You remember that Gf actually coded for two things. Gf coded for the weak coupling constant Gw and the denominator 1 by mw squared, right? And I said mw is around 100 GeV. So if mw is equal to 100 GeV, if I had put the propagator mw squared, I would have got 10 power 4. So that the 10 power minus 4 part of the 10 power minus 5 is actually coming from the fact that we are coding this in terms of nucleon mass squared rather than W mass squared. So all that is left over, if I had written this in terms of what we today know as the mass of the W, is that you will have around 0.1 left over in the numerator, which means that the weak interaction is weak not because the coupling constant is small. The 0.1 coupling constant, so that if I square it, 0.1 squared is 0.01, is roughly of the same order as the electromagnetic coupling constant, the charge E, right? Because alpha was 1 by 137. The reason the weak interaction is weak is because of this mass denominator, because the W and Z particles are so massive. Also because W and Z are so massive, these are very short ranged interactions. Okay? So the thing that we have now noticed is that the weak interactions are weak at these energies because the coupling constant is small, but really that is coding for the very large W mass. Now there is one more interesting thing, and I will write that down. It is a number, so I do not remember it, I will write it down. Therefore, you see that I have actually determined GF through mu dk. So if I define GF coming from mu dk, and if I actually put in exactly the numbers, this is 1.16632 plus or minus 0.402, so 402, and of course 10 power minus 5 GeV minus 2. And if I find GF by looking at a beta decay with a nucleus, I will get 1.136. It is not as good because many constants are unknown. I will also explain why. And you can see that the error bars are small. Because the error bars are small, these two numbers are not the same. 136. Okay. So, is it that there is a difference? Is it that this is an experimental error, or is it that there is actually no universality between the muon decay portion and the nucleon decay portion? So, what I mean here is that mu goes to nu mu E nu E bar, and when I take n goes to P E nu E bar, really what I have at the quark level, I have D goes to U E nu E bar. So, you can see that the diagram is the same. In modern language, if this is mu or D, we will go to nu mu or U and E nu E bar. Okay? And therefore, if these weak interactions are mediated by W, you would have expected this coupling to be universal. The same charge E exists whether it couples to electron, of course a fractional charge times quark charge, but the same constant E appears everywhere. But here it appears as though the couplings to leptons and the coupling to quarks are slightly different. They are almost the same, but they are slightly different. And this actually has a very important consequence, or there is a reason. It turns out that, yeah, ask.
But when we couple two quarks, suppose we couple two up quarks, then the coupling will be 4 by 9 E scale, which will be less than that of electron.
No. But anything. For example, if I have a positron or an electron, or if I have a mu minus or a mu plus, the electromagnetic field coupling is the same to all these objects, right?
Yes, ma'am. Right. Because they have same charge.
Yeah, but the weak interaction, it is not as though they are fractional charges. They are just some small amount different from each other. And what we will find is that the GF is actually universal. GF is actually universal. What does it mean? It means that the W boson couples the same way to leptons and quarks. However, why the two are different is a very peculiar reason, and I will come to that, I will explain it. But first, before I explain it, I will talk about pion decay. Once I talk about pion decay, I will talk about kaon decay, and then I will explain why these two numbers are slightly different. Is it okay? So let me first talk about pion decay. Now, as I said, since this course has been little bit shortened, I don't have time to do form factors for proton. So you can ask how protons interact with photons, pure electromagnetic scattering. And because unlike an electron, which is a point particle, a proton is actually an extended object. When this couples to a photon, you won't, this is not exactly an IE gamma mu, because that works only for point particles, but this has some other structure, though of course it has an index mu, because the photon has to couple to a vector electromagnetic current, right. So it has to have some charge mu, and the coefficients inside are called form factors. These form factors, which I will not have time to talk about in this lecture, and therefore I will take a simple example and tell you what a form factor means, actually indicate therefore that the proton is not a point object, and the form factor actually reflects the way charge is distributed in the finite size inside the proton. So the example that I will take is a simpler example, because to set up this structure for electromagnetic electron proton scattering is harder. I will do the simple example of, we already saw this process when we talked about CP. You remember that because neutrino was left handed, under charge conjugation pi minus goes to mu minus nu mu L, that process is not seen. Similarly, the parity conjugate process is not seen, but when you apply both C and P together, you will get pi minus goes to mu minus nu mu bar R, and this process is seen. So we had said that Cp seems to be conserved, whereas individually C and P are violated. So let us look at this process and try to understand the meaning of the form factor. So what we will do is, pi plus, if you remember when we started out our quark spectroscopy, is basically a ud bar combination pseudoscalar. Okay. So now I will have to write, we know that there is some W, okay, and this W goes to mu plus nu mu, okay, and this part is completely satisfied by writing gamma mu into 1 minus gamma phi. But what happens on this side? Pi is not exactly ud bar, pi looks like ud bar, okay. So what I can write is that, okay, here is my ud bar, this is my u, this is my d bar, and somehow this ud bar has to whatever be bound together to form the pi. Okay. So let me see how I can, this is a 2 going to 2 process for the decay, everything else is the same, I only have to write the matrix element. So let me just write the matrix element. Let me write the easy part of the matrix element. So I know that if this is a vertex mu, I will have, let us call this P1, P2 and P. So I will have u bar P2, right, gamma mu into 1 minus gamma phi V of P1, okay. Now we are not going to write the propagator, we are going to write Gf by root 2, that we have already explained. Now what is it that I will write over here? That is the question. This is not simply ud bar annihilating into mu plus nu mu, this is actually pion decaying to this. So that means I have to write something over here, I do not know what that is, which will represent this whole blob, but there must be some index, and we know that that index also has to be mu, because the propagator g mu nu term we have abandoned, right. So what all quantities could be there over here? So the way in which such form factors are set up is to appeal to Lorentz invariance or Lorentz covariance actually. I must be able to write any object here which has this index mu. What are all the vectors available to me? This is a pseudoscalar, so there is no spin associated with it. So the only vector associated with this is P. So only thing I can write is P mu. So I say that this whole vertex is proportional to P mu, and the coefficient of proportionality is what I call the form factor of the pion f pi. This form factor tells you how this pi can be thought of as a UD bar pair. So the same thing will happen, for example, when you look at proton scattering with electron or anything else through electromagnetic processes. Now you see what happens to this matrix element. If I write this like this, so let me write GF, of course f pi comes out, okay. Now you can compute this, so let me call it U bar 2 gamma mu 1 minus gamma phi V1 and then P mu. But P mu, you remember, is P is equal to P1 plus P2. So I can write it as P1 plus P2. Now you can see that P1 mu gamma mu, P2 mu gamma mu. So this will be, you can simplify this, right? U bar 2. So the first term will be P slash 1 minus gamma phi, and the second term will be P2 slash 1 minus gamma phi P1. Now what I can do is I flip the P1 through this, and what will I get? 1 plus gamma phi. But what is P1 slash acting on V1? It is simply M1. Okay. Then P2 slash acting on U2 is M2. Now when I square this, what will happen? This is M, a similar term will be M dagger, and then you can just, this will just be two gamma matrices. So because V1 bar will give you P1 slash, U2 bar will give you P2 slash. So there will be only two gamma matrices with gamma phi, so the gamma phi term will not contribute. You can actually compute this entire thing, and maybe I should just write down the answer. It's very straightforward. And I am going to write the final answer. So I am going to write gamma is equal to gamma of mu goes to mu. Okay, I will. Okay. So let me maybe make one more step over here. So here M2 is the neutrino mass, so I am going to call that 0. So this will simply be U bar 2 okay. So the matrix element is proportional to the mass of the muon, okay. That is a very important comment. Now I will write down the answer. You can just complete this calculation. Where is the answer? GF squared. I mean, it's a simple trace, right? And then I've also put in the two body phase space, which is very trivial. That is that d omega integration only will be there, and it will be completely trivial d omega integration m pi. So because now I'll call M1 as mu, when I square this I should get mu squared, and then I have okay. Is this clear, the calculation? I just don't want to keep on doing these traces. So the main thing is that it is proportional to mu squared. I want to make two remarks over here, okay. The first remark, so this is mu plus goes to pi plus goes to mu plus mu. Sorry. Now I can have I can simply write it down by inspection, right? I don't remember what this number is, you can just check it out. You have to take half an MeV for the mass of the electron and 100 for the mass of the muon. So this is already 100 squared, but then there is a correction factor here. So you will get some number which is so small. Okay. So you can see that if you just look at it, electron is very light. You would expect the electron, the process where pi decays into electron and neutrino to happen much more often than into muon and neutrino. But this is actually a suppressed process. So I want you to work this out at home. Okay. I want you to work out that this is helicity suppressed because of left chiral electron having only small right helicity component. Did you understand this question? So this is your homework. You can do this. So you have to show that the mass term appears here. I rubbed that out. Okay, you remember in the matrix element, the mass term appeared because the left chiral state was being projected onto the right helicity state, and you already did this as homework, that this is only possible and it will be proportional to m over e of that particle, and that is why this gets suppressed. This is the first comment. Now the second comment is, was there a question? Okay. So this is the first statement. The second statement is that, let me look at now for pi plus going to mu plus nu mu, I wrote in some sense u d bar goes to mu plus nu mu, but k plus is u s bar. So that means this process will mean that I have now when this process was first understood or studied, they knew u, d and s, but they did not know of the existence of the charm quark. Okay. So you can see that this should not have happened because u and d form one doublet, nu e and e form one doublet, and nu mu and mu form one doublet. So if this is coming as one doublet, then this should have been ticked and this should not have been there. Okay. But this process actually happens. This is suppressed compared to this, but this also happens, and in the next class we will try to understand why this happens, because there are two things. One is that there is a charm quark which people did not know of, and it has S as its partner, and furthermore D and S states mix in such a way that not only this coupling, the first generation, this UD couples to any other set of these things, but also the across conversion can happen. Okay. So what is it so special about the across conversion? As far as charge is concerned, there is no difference, right? All the upper quantities have plus 2/3 charge, all the lower quantities have minus 1/3 charge. But so far you had always been assuming that they always go from U to D, C to S, nu E to E, nu mu to mu. So this across generation mixing of U to S was something that was seen for the first time in this process. So that is understood as a quantum mechanical mixing, and this quantum mechanical mixing then makes you understand so many other properties, and it will also eventually lead us to the neutral weak interaction, which will be mediated by the Z boson. So what we have learned in this class is to understand muon decay, to put in the lifetime of the muon and extract the GF, and we find the GF is very small. And then we also see the example of pi going to E mu nu mu and E nu E, and understand that it has something to do with helicity suppression. And finally, that analogous to pi decay, there is k decay, and that happens because there is not only U to D possible. So that means if I invert this graph, I not only have U goes to D through weak interactions, but also I have U goes to S through weak interactions. And this is something new, and this is explained by quark mixing. Okay, so I will stop here. So this part I want you to try. There is a weekend coming up. I want you to try this. If you don't get it, then I will explain it to you, and then I will go on with this part of the phenomenology. So I will talk more about mixing. So I will start this again. I just introduce this again for you to get familiar with the idea, so you can think about it. And in the next class, I will again come back and talk about quark mixing and what is called the Jim mechanism. Okay. So yes.
When will this lecture be uploaded?
When will the lecture be uploaded? Well, whenever I guess.
Will it be uploaded before the weekend?
Before the weekend. Okay, I'll ask.
This weekend.
I will ask Gayatri to do it. But let me then go over each part of it. So the mu decay completely is available in Halzen and Martin. Okay. The pi decay is also there in Halzen and Martin. So you can get both of them from Halzen and Martin. Maybe the interpretation, I don't know. I mean, it's a long time since I read the book. I have the book with me. Let me just check.
Well, this helicity part is given in Martin.
Okay, fine.
Only the explanation, but not the calculation.
Okay, fine. But the calculation is extremely simple, because you can see that the calculation only involves. No, I think the calculation is also there.
There in prefix, the calculation.
It will be there. It's a very standard calculation. This vertex is exactly what you have calculated, gamma mu into 1 minus gamma phi. Only for this I wrote p mu f pi, right? F pi remains f pi, becomes square as f pi squared, and the p mu I wrote as p1 plus p2, and then in fact it even simplifies. If you don't want to simplify it, you can do the entire trace, and then you can multiply it by p mu and you will get back the same answer. Okay. So what we have done is we have kept only the pi and mu mass, and the neutrino mass we have set to 0. So and it's a two body process, right? So the decay will have 1 by 2 m pi would have been there from the initial flux, and the phase space, one integration goes away from the delta function, and only the d omega of the muon will be left, which is simply d cos theta. That will be a very straightforward integration, because there is no cos theta dependence in the entire thing. It will be extremely simple. So you can do that yourself. Okay. This explanation from here to here is obvious, because I have just substituted mu by me, and then this quantity is sorry, there's a square I missed over here. Sorry, there's a square. Okay, sorry about that. And so this helicity suppression, if the explanation is there, please look at it. Otherwise, think about it and we can discuss it in the next class. This I will do all over again. See, what I like to do is, since these classes, you're learning new things, and I think some people are having difficulty, I try to present it a little bit in one class and then go over it again next class, so that you're seeing it like 2 times. Okay. So don't worry if you didn't understand this part. I will again do the whole thing. Okay. This whole k decay and k0 decay I will do again in the next class. Okay. Up till here I will assume that you have understood, but I will try and ask them to upload the lecture by the weekend. Okay, by tomorrow, that is. And I think the best way to do all this is to actually work it out, and then you will become a master of traces. But these are all simple traces. They are not difficult, so you can do that. So is it okay? Are there any other questions? Okay. So maybe we will spend only 1 or 2 more classes on the phenomenology. Then we will go over into, we will start writing Lagrangians. And then you will see why I didn't introduce them in the first place. So what we will do is we will write the Lagrangian for weak interaction and electromagnetic interaction, show the unification, then introduce the Higgs boson, and more or less I think we will stop there.